giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles with Dog Nation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chapins.
Hello all and welcome into On the Beat. I am not Cody Chapins. I am Kaylee Mansell filling in for Cody Chapins for today alongside Mike Griffith. And life is starting to feel right again, Mike. Basketball is coming to an end. Now we get to have Georgia's spring game. Feels like all the pieces are finally starting to fall into place.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. We're actually going to get to watch the football. At least if you go to the game, you will. It's not televised. Kaylee, Kirby wants to keep this game off TV, I guess. And I wonder what we'll see. You know, we had a story at Dog Nation where we talked to some people who were at the scrimmage. Obviously, the media was not allowed to attend. However, a lot of the boosters that give enough money can go. It's kind of a built-in perk for them, I guess. If you're going to donate tens of thousands of dollars, Kirby's going to reward you with some access to his program. And of course, they have some personnel that work for the school that have watched a lot of these. So able to gather a little report. And it sounds like Georgia looks pretty doggone good right now.
Yeah, well, we'll finally get a chance to see them in action this Saturday when G-Day takes place. So that'll kind of be the subject here for a little bit is what are the things that Georgia needs to accomplish in their spring game? Obviously, it's different. They will be able to hear some of that live noise and have some of that experience, but not necessarily maybe what we've seen spring games be in the past. We'll also talk a little bit about the House versus NCAA settlement that starts today. We'll get into some SEC quarterback rankings, and then we'll do an all-around of other sports. But let's go ahead and start with G-Day. So It's one of those things where you can only simulate so much of a real game, but there are still things that you can accomplish and answer some questions. And the first thing that I think that Georgia needs to accomplish in my head is think about last year. There weren't many games in which Georgia got up by so much that a lot of the younger guys were able to get real game time experience. Despite the Clemson game where they were up so far and all the true freshmen got to come in and they showed that big stat at the end of the game. And then after that, really didn't get to see that. So I think you got to get a lot of reps for the young guys, especially those in that true sophomore group.
Well, for sure. You know, there's going to be a lot of guys filling a lot of shoes. What did we have? I'm trying to remember, Kaylee, we were at the Combine together. Wasn't there 13 or 14 Georgia players there? I think it matched the most that they'd ever sent. So maybe not the number of first rounders, only three, only three projected first rounders, but still a lot of guys that are moving on and leadership roles and positions where experience depth is a question. So I think you're right. In the secondary where you lose a guy like Malachi Starks and Dan Jackson, right? So you lost two leaders there that had a lot of experience, and so we know it's going to be a young secondary. There's some transfers that have come in. There's some new personnel. It sounds good that Jonel Aguero had a great scrimmage Saturday because that's a big piece. We know Aguero had some injuries last year and had some struggles. So the fact that Jonel is now into form, I think that's a big one to have that star. Thought Tyke Smith was excellent at that and helped him win a championship. So I think that star position is important. Sounds like that box is checked. Feel good about Everett's experience, and I feel good that Georgia has the depth and talent at the other corner position. So really we're just dialing it down to one safety position because we know that KJ Bolden is a rising star and it was pretty assignment sound as a true freshman. So I feel like we're just down to one position there in the secondary, and we'll be able to evaluate those guys next Saturday.
Yeah, and looking at some of those younger guys, you have to think about the sophomores that are going to have to play a much larger role this year than they did last year. Ellis Robinson, Justin Williams, Jaden Riddell, Joseph Jonah Ajonye, those guys that are going to have to play bigger roles with not the same experience as some of the other guys like KJ Bolden, Nate Frazier. Those are the guys that need it most. But to your point about the safety position, that was something I also had on my list, is that you need to have as many safeties get as first-team reps as possible because you bring in transfers, Adrian Maddox, Jaden Harris, Zion Branch, and then you've got guys that have kind of been waiting their time like Ja'Cory Thomas. And from what we've heard about the younger safeties from Kirby Smart, he's not pinpointing to one that's performing better than the other, which leads me to believe that they still don't know who that other starting safety is going to be alongside KJ. So you have to have all of those guys get in the scenario for what it would be like to play with the first team, because at this point, that is the big question mark in terms of the secondary.
Yeah, I think we like the fact that there's a lot of good depth and talent there. So I feel like that'll take care of itself somewhat. I think that another thing that happened in the scrimmage that impressed a lot of people, and we'd already heard a lot about Elijah Griffin, We heard a lot about him in recruiting. We heard a lot about him from Warren Brinson. And apparently, this guy is everything they say he is. He's a very mature kid. He's a very athletic kid. He's a very strong kid. I think he can play multiple positions on the defensive line. The fact that they're going to look at him to play some nose tackle as well as defensive tackle, maybe even a little end, tells me this is going to be a guy that's going to be on the field for a lot of snaps in different areas, in different situations. Kind of use him as a weapon. And we saw Jalen Carter used in that way. Now, I'm not saying he's Jalen Carter. That's a really tough comparison for anyone, but I am saying that this is going to be an integral part of the defensive line. And Georgia needed this, right? Because Warren Brinson's moving on, Nazir Stackhouse moving on, Ty Ingram Dawkins moving on. Those are three very experienced and capable players. And so you were going to need some younger guys to step up. Maybe we didn't expect it to be a true freshman, Kaylee, but apparently Griffin has the look and is worthy of those stars. And whatever Georgia's paying him, it sounds like they're going to get their money's worth this season.
Well, that's certainly the freshman that we've heard the most talked about. And especially in the way that people have gone about speaking on his behalf, people like Warren Brinson, it's like they've hyped him up so much, which is what I think Kirby Smart was trying to avoid. But when you have a guy of that size and a recruiting profile that is that high up, like, of course there's going to be attention, but the cool thing about Elijah Griffin is you don't even know what number he's wearing. You're going to look on the field and know exactly who it is.
Oh yeah. and the other cool thing is that even though he's gotten this hype and this money on the front end, he's performing, because that's the danger, right? When guys read their own, you heard Oscar Delp say, I was reading my own headlines. That's a third-year player. For a young freshman to have this hype and to be paid, because that's another thing, right? We talk about, well, you pay these guys on the front end, maybe they're not going to have the incentive. No, this guy is stepping up and giving Georgia exactly what they thought they were going to get. And, he's not the only one. You talked about some other younger players that, we thought might emerge. And we heard the name Chris Cole quite a lot when we were at the Combine, when we were asking Smile Munden who's the most athletic guy on the team. And everybody's been raving about Chris Cole. And he's important because with Smile moving on, I think he was probably your best coverage linebacker. And all reports were that Chris Cole looked outstanding in scrimmage too. Now, I'm sure Kirby's going to try to fool him and put him in a bad position in the scrimmage because that's what these coaches do. They script it. They set these guys up. You think you're seeing this. If you're going to try to cheat because you think you've seen it in practice, we're going to cross you up. So they'll go after these young guys. They'll try to throw them off and make it where they have to read their keys. But I think it's really exciting to hear Chris Cole's name as one of the guys that really stood out on defense on the scrimmage. And honestly, just hearing those three names, Jonel Aguero and Griffin and Cole, that gave me a boost of confidence in Georgia because they haven't done it yet. We've heard they're coming along. We've heard that, they're making strides. But to hear that they performed well in a scrimmage and probably more of a scrimmage than what we're going to see on G-Day because it was closed, I think that's really encouraging. So then I guess I looked to the offense, and I heard a lot of encouragement there, Kaylee, but I can't help but call out the elephant in the room, and it's something that you and I talked about before the show. When you get right down to it, is Gunnar Stockton not good enough or smart enough or work hard enough? Is he talented enough to win a national championship at quarterback? And it's not fair to evaluate him yet, because he got thrown in the SEC title game, and I thought he did an amazing job. He made a couple mistakes in that game. Got fortunate one of those went out of bounds. But the Notre Dame game wasn't Gunner's best moment. There was a very costly turnover. There's questions about the quickness of his release. He knows that. I'm sure that's something he's working on. He's talked about improving his footwork in the pocket. It wasn't up to what Carson's was. And I don't think anybody thinks he has a Carson Beck NFL arm yet. Now, these guys get better as they go. But at the end of the day, is Gunnar Stockton a good enough quarterback with what he has around him? That's not number one defense over there like Stetson had. Is he good enough to win some of these shootouts? If you got 2 or 3 games like last year that are 50-50 games that come down to that 2-minute drill, are you going to win all 3? 2 out of 3? 1 out of 3? And I don't really know the answer to that.
Yeah, so far we've got reps for the young guys, getting as many first-team reps for the safeties that have come in or have waited their turn. But when you look at the offensive side of the ball, when you talk about quarterback play, I think you have to use G-Day to have a better understanding of exactly what it is that you have in your quarterbacks. And something that you said a couple minutes ago where it's like, okay, we've heard that they've done well in practice and we've heard that they've been making strides, but like all that kind of goes out the window when you put them in a G-Day scenario. And you can also tie this back into lack of experience. I mean, Gunnar does have some experience, but not that much. Ryan Puglisi has no real-time game experience. And then you also have to throw in your other guys that you have, like the preferred walk-on, Coulter Ginn, and then Ryan Montgomery, the true freshman, is not going to be able to go out there. He's been dealing with injury. So then you have to use as much time for G-Day as you can to give these quarterbacks as much experience as possible, but also to understand what do you have in them that's not a scrimmage, that's not in front of a crowd, because it's probably a little bit easier to play better in that scenario. But when you've got fans and people yelling and you put them in that stadium, how are they actually going to compete?
Well, the report from the scrimmage was, Ginn actually looked pretty decent. I mean, you don't expect a preferred walk-on to look pretty decent, but this is the school of Stetson Bennett, who was once a walk-on, so who knows,
and
right?
Hey, I mean, Ginn was a state champion at a big school. You know, he's a winner.
Yeah, and that's the number one thing, and that's what I love about Gunnar Stockton, by the way. Even if he doesn't have the NFL arm or the prototypical size, we saw how gritty he is and how hard he works. We know he's as learned and gets through his progressions as fast as anyone. We know he'll be an effective game manager. We're just talking merely about the quickness of the delivery, the footwork, and the running abilities and his ability to protect himself for an entire season. From Puglisi's standpoint, everyone talks about how electric his arm is, and we've heard that for a while. This is a guy that can really jack it, maybe the best arm on the team, okay? But where is he at as far as getting through his progressions and managing the offense? I mean, we always just take it for granted because I think Georgia quarterbacks are so good at managing the game. You don't see a lot of delay of games. Maybe there doesn't seem to be a whole bunch of confusion. I mean, every now and then Stetson would get off track, but you know, his feet were so good, he'd be able to run himself out of situations and make some great plays and make some plays off the scramble. I don't think any of these guys have that Stetson Bennett playmaking ability. So it's going to be important that Ryan Puglisi shows that he can be more consistent with his decision making and getting through his progressions, because the arm is there. No one is questioning the arm. No one is questioning the work ethic. No one is questioning the physicality or the attitude or the moxie of this kid. It's just a matter of the comparison I've heard from quarterback coaches. Can he fly the jet? And there's a lot to fly in a jet. You've looked in that cockpit before. I know I have. And you say, oh my gosh, they got to look at all the, when you play quarterback, you're flying the jet, man, in the Georgia offense at least. Now, maybe some other offensive simplify, and it's more like flying a helicopter, and I actually had that analogy given to me, and they keep it really simple. Georgia runs a pro-style offense because they want to be able to make changes at the line of scrimmage and get their players in the best position to make plays against whatever personnel package or whatever defensive lineman or matchups present themselves. So you've got a guy who's got to calculate all this information. By the time he breaks the huddle, he's got to look at that personnel. He's got somebody in his ear. He's got to look at his personnel. He's got to make sure everybody's properly aligned. And then he's got to do it in this, 12, 13-second window? It's amazing when you think about how much Georgia quarterbacks have to process. And Puglisi is in the process right now. Does the light snap on? Perhaps, or does it not? I don't know. It takes different quarterback, different amounts of time, but I think you made the point. This G-Day with the bells and the whistles and the crowd and the coaches scheming, this is going to be, it's kind of like the final exam of spring term for Puglisi. It's not to say he can't get better in the offseason and work hard. He will. Not to say he can't get better in the fall. Not to say he couldn't be ready if something happened to Gunnar, game 1, 2, or 3. There's still time to develop, and he's getting some great work with the ones right now, progressing, but not where he needs to be at this point.
Yeah, so although G-Day is going to look a little bit different this year, and we're not exactly sure at what capacity the whole team will be able to go, there are still things that Georgia can accomplish and get done with this spring game. Now let's transition to the house settlement. So in simple terms,
let me give you. Wait a minute.
You got one more?
I got 2 more.
Oh, throw it out there.
I can't help it because we've just been asking about the receivers so much. So from everything I'm hearing, Dylan Bell looks great as a slash player. He's going to be a weapon. He's going to be all over the place. And that's awesome because this is what Dylan can do. I don't think he was a feature receiver, but he can do this slash thing. So that's big. You also got Cash Jones. I like that Georgia's got some guys that, Mike Bobo can, play Dr. Frankenstein with and move these guys around from game to game. And, oh, my gosh, defenses didn't know they line up here. But the tight end room, I think, is going to take a step back towards greatness. Now, Brock Bowers not coming out that tunnel, Kaylee, but Ellis Williams is. And everything I'm hearing about this cat, what is he, 6'7", 255?
Right around
They
that.
say, and cat is the right word. I remember going to see an Orlando Magic game one time back in the day and watching Shaquille O'Neal and saying, how can a guy that big and that heavy move like that? Because Shaq was like a big tiger. It was amazing to watch Shaq play. Ellis Williams at 6'7", 255 moves with the fluidity of a receiver. Now, the title says tight end, but don't be surprised if you don't see him moved into the slot. Some nightmare matchups. Because if you're on defense, what do you do? Do you try to put a linebacker on this guy? Do you try to put a little safety on this guy? I mean, you've got to make some decisions. And oh, by the way, Lawson Lucky is killing it right now. And we know that Lucky can make plays. We've seen him flash. And we said, man, when Lawson Lucky puts it all together. And then who was Riddell? Jaden Riddell wasn't Smile telling us. He said, hey, you're going to see him. And we haven't even talked about Oscar Delp yet. What do you have, like 3 games in a row with touchdowns? So this tight ends room is back on track. I thought last year it was a disappointment, just being completely honest. Looking at PFF grades and looking at some of the production and lack of production, whether it was Carson not throwing the ball when they were supposed to or them not catching it. Either way, Georgia tight end room took a big step back.
Yeah.
The receivers, right? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Kaylee.
No, I was going to say, when you have someone like Elias Williams in your room, it's like constantly, when you're in basketball, always having a mismatch. Like, he's the one that's going to stand out. You're always going to have to find a different way to shift things around to take care of one player, which throws everything else off for a defense.
Listen to Kaylee making the stretch four analogy. We got an Ace and Newell here, a football team right here. You got the 6'10" guy that can shoot the 3 and take the bigs out of the paint or rebound. That's a really good analogy. Receivers, it's important to mention these because the position got beat up a lot last year. Yeah. And we talked a lot about a lack of consistency and how would they do. Well, from everything I'm hearing, Colby Young, London Humphreys, Noah Thomas, these guys are looking good and consistent. But how about Talon Taylor? When is the last time a true freshman came in and made an impact? Now, you could say George Pickens, but remember, George really didn't kick in until the second half of the season. This is a different kind of 5-star. Obviously, he's not going to be a Stretch Armstrong like George and make those kind of catches, but he's got speed and separation. And the fact that he's already making these plays and scrimmages right now is really exciting to me, that you may have an impact freshman. We've heard in the past, they signed all these guys, and it never seems to come to fruition. I think this guy is, Kaylee. So I think there's a really good supporting cast with the tight ends, with the receivers. Obviously, Frazier's doing pretty well. We're hearing Bo Walker's kind of Dejon Edwards-like kind of pinballs between the tackles, and Phillips has got the speed. So I feel like you've got a really good skill position cast, and that's why I dial it back to, can you win with Gunnar Stockton being a game manager, or does he need the extra? And so that's kind of the view for me when I look at the talent and the impact that a lot of these guys, transfers and freshmen, guys that are grown into roles. It sounds like scrimmage 2 was the best practice of scrimmage that they've had all spring long. So there's a lot of momentum rolling into this. Although I'm sure Kirby will get up there and tell us there's 1,000 things that they've got to fix.
Yeah, and maybe one thing that would be, just kind of cool to see is what Nate Frazier, KJ Bolden, and Chris Cole were to Georgia last year. Like, who becomes those 3 freshmen that play as big of a role as they did? So maybe G-Day can help us figure that out too. All right, you ready to move on to the boring stuff? Talk about the house settlement.
Well, yeah, it's more drama than we'd like, but yeah.
Hey, look, here in simple terms, it starts today, the House versus NCAA. The effect would take place on July 1st. Essentially paves the way for schools to directly compensate athletes from a capped pool of an estimated $20.5 million, with that number increasing every 3 years. And then, of course, it comes with the roster limitation. So rosters will be capped at 105 players, which essentially takes away all walk-ons. So, Mike, in totality, why is this so important, and who does it directly impact?
Well, it's going to have to schools are going to have to figure out how to compensate players, because it's kind of like the $20.5 million. All right, I'm going to try to explain this without it getting too complex. So $20.5 million is the base number every school can offer. Now, if a player had an offer, let's just say from Porsche, a product that didn't have anything to do directly with the school, and I don't know, maybe the Germans want to get into American football, I don't know. But let's just say this outside entity, this outside corporation came along and said, you know what, this Elias Williams guy, he reminds us of a Porsche Cayenne because he's big and fast and agile, and we want to give him a deal. That deal would go through what we call a clearinghouse, and there's an entity called Deloitte that's a third party, and they would look at it and say, yes, that is a legitimate deal that doesn't have to do with any booster or anybody, any relations with Georgia. So he can sign that deal, and it's not going to count against the $20.5 million salary cap, right? The $20.5 million salary cap is booster funds or corporations with direct ties to the university. And you can gather all the money you want, but at $20.5 million, that's it. So the pay for play, or the NIL deals, the true NIL deals, are going to be what's brokered outside of what the university boosters and supporters have been able to do. So how well will Georgia be able to market their players, or how attractive will their players be to some of these outside corporations? You think about Coca-Cola, you think about Chick-fil-A,
Delta.
You think about Dr. Pepper, Delta. To your point, do those corporations get involved, or do they get involved with a guy from every school? Maybe every player in the SEC's Delta's got a NIL deal with, or something to that effect. So now we get into the creative financing part of how these players are going to be able to get paid outside of the salary cap. So even though you say it's going to be a level playing field, and oh, by the way, there's some schools that aren't going to be able to come up with that $20.5 million. And not going to be able to fund full scholarships like Georgia's going to do. Georgia is actually going to add about 100 scholarships, Kaylee, as part of this. So so maybe baseball players, for example, that whole partial scholarship thing, out the window. So maybe you come to Georgia, you get a full scholarship. Maybe if you're some ACC school that doesn't have the same funding, maybe you get a half scholarship at Duke, but if you come play at Georgia, so now you've got some competitive advantages in some of these non-revenue sports in terms of what Georgia's going to do and how they're going to split their money up. So Georgia's doing what they can do, but the big picture at the end of the day is, what can you do and how much money can you raise outside of the $20.5 million? And will Ohio State and Texas continue to have those big advantages with their corporate connections and their powerful alumni bases? So that's going to be interesting, and that's a little bit closer to home. You brought up, some of the other points about how they're going to get 22% of what the Power 5 schools' total revenue was, and that's how they arrived at this $20.5 million. Well, don't be surprised if that doesn't get challenged in court. Or if you want to get congressional oversight, if they say, well, what percentage are they getting in the NBA or the NFL? It's more than that. So there's going to be more lawsuits. How do we apply Title IX to this? Title IX, which ensures that, women's sports get equal funding. Well, now this is based on revenue. Does Title IX still apply? This is going to be fought out in court or settled in court to determine how do schools take care of their women's athletic programs, and is Title IX something that you can apply to this new model? So this is just the way to look at this is just the first step. There's going to be more lawsuits. They're going back to 2016 and paying $2.6 billion.
Yep.
You better believe there's going to be somebody from 2015 that's going to say, I want my money too.
Yep.
So there's going to be a lot more litigation, and that's not fun. It's not what we want to talk about, but there's concerns in terms of how it affects the schools more immediately with the roster size. With the front loading, for example, you mentioned July 1st. Kirby Smart brought up the fact that a lot of schools are trying to pay all these guys all this money right now before July 1st gets here. Well, then once July 1st gets here, how are they going to keep everybody under budget? There's going to be a bubble, and some people are going to get messed over here. And Kirby's going, you can see what's about to happen. It ain't good. Agents are marketing guys that they don't even have. They're saying, how much would you pay for player A, B, and C? And they get a school to say, we'd pay this guy $2 million. Then they call the player and says, hey, you don't know me, but I know you, and I can get you $2 million from LSU or from whoever. And that's one of the more underhanded things. Kirby's talking about Zoom calls with agents representing several players. He goes, I don't want to get on that. I might have one of my players show up on that. You just don't know. So it's going to be a little crazy as college football evolves and college sports evolves with this new NIL revenue model, this new salary cap. I don't think it's going to be settled for quite some time. I think it's going to be in a state of evolution from now to eternity.
So I do have one question, and then after that we'll move on and we'll rank some SEC quarterbacks. But one of Georgia's biggest competitors on the recruiting trail this entire last year has been Oregon. And you look at a school like Oregon, who's funded so much by Phil Knight and Nike. So when it comes to a school like Oregon, could Nike just sign all of their athletes and that way it's, outside of what the school is giving them? Or is there going to be an exception? Or how would that work for schools like that? And I believe Arkansas is tied to like Walmart. So how does it apply to schools like that do have some sort of competitive advantage?
Well, that's where Deloitte comes in. And that's where a lot of the administrators are saying, we don't really know. It depends on how they rule. I mean, this is an unknown. This is an unprecedented situation, right? Just kind of like the college football playoff committee. We didn't know how that would work either. I'm not sure we still know how that works, Kaylee, when we take a look at how these teams get ranked and what's supposed to be important actually is. But that's one of the bigger questions is how's Deloitte going to rule? And what's going to pass the sniff test is being a deal that doesn't count towards the $20.5 million salary cap and what is going to be applied to the salary cap. And until we get into those waters, we really don't know. And so that's why everybody's kind of on pins and needles like, okay, this is kind of the plan, but how is this going to work in practice? And that's what remains to be seen.
I'm just really glad I'm not one of the people that has to figure out that whole situation. So hopefully we'll have more coverage on this as it begins today. So in just a minute, we are going to take a Mike's 30,000-foot view look at SEC quarterbacks. But first, this is On the Beat, brought to you by Ingles.
It's time to discover the convenience and time savings of contact-free pickup with Ingles Curbside. Just visit shop.ingles-markets.com or download the app. And your Ingles personal shopper gets to work with specialized training on how to select the freshest items for a pre-scheduled pickup. They'll even text you with updates. You pull up to a designated space and your personal shopper delivers your items right to your vehicle. Fresh, fast, and affordable. It's all in the bag. Ingles. Low prices. Love the savings.
All right, the good thing about here at On the Beat is that sometimes we can take a look at things from a wider view. That's what we're going to do with SEC quarterbacks today, and we're going to do it Mike's 30,000-foot view style. All right, so we're at that point now where everybody's putting out their way too early rankings and what that looks like. And so Mike and I are going to rank SEC quarterbacks, but we're only going to do the top half, the guys that have some experience or have been with the program or are supposed to make a big splash. So we're going to do the top 8. Mike, do you want to start at the top or do you want to start at the bottom?
Well, I'll tell you what, you get into these top 4, Kaylee, and it's really, really hard to differentiate these quarterbacks. But I'm going to start there. And, my first quarterback might surprise you because he didn't play a full season. But from everything I'm hearing about what this quarterback brings, not just on the field, but off the field, leadership.
Don't do it, Mike. Don't do it.
And the season turnaround that I witnessed in Gainesville, I'm going with DJ Lagway. That's the guy that I'd want under center for me if I had a first choice. This year, I'm going to start with Lagway.
Wow. Okay. I mean, just go ahead and throw it all out there, Mike.
Well, I mean, he was beating the Dogs when he got hurt. Florida turned it around, and I don't necessarily believe it was all Billy Napier's coaching. But the way the Gators finished the season, something happened. And when you talk to Billy Napier, when I talked to him, I cornered him at the Senior Bowl. You were there. I mean, he was making his rounds. I was talking to him for 20 minutes. And he's like, the quarterback sets the tone in the building. And I kind of had some Carson Beck flashbacks. But I was like, he says, DJ is a guy that just leads. I watch the balls that he throws, and they're the most catchable. It's like, oh, my gosh. It's like he's got it on a string. He seems unflappable. He's got decent mobility. He's not a runner, but he's got decent mobility. But the leadership, the intangible is the thing that when you play Florida and you got a quarterback like that everyone believes in, that carries himself a certain way off the field as well. I mean, this guy is really coveted in the Florida football building. So I'm going to start there. Now, there's 4 guys that it could have been, but that's the one that I'm going to choose in this way too early quarterback ranking. Where are you going with it?
I have DJ pretty high up. I don't have him at number 1. I'm going with a more safe option because I think now more than ever in college football, experience is so important. So I threw Garrett Nussmeier at the top. I think that his decision to return actually gives LSU a really good chance to make the college football playoff, potentially make a run. You look at his stats, over 4,000 yards, 29 touchdowns, second in the SEC in passing yards per game, and then finished third in completions. Like, if you're LSU, you feel good about that. I think Garrett Nussmeier has the highest ceiling of anybody in the SEC, so I'm taking Garrett Nussmeier with my number 1 pick. Who's your number 2?
Oh, this is another tough one, and this is I like the mobile quarterback, and Lenore Sellers is downright scary. This guy is so big and so fast, and talk about upside. Mike Shula is his quarterbacks coach there at South Carolina, and I've watched this guy basically just put the team on his shoulders and beat Clemson. I mean, it was amazing. South Carolina, another team. When you look at how they finished last season after that controversial home loss to LSU, you didn't want to play them. Now, they lost their bowl because obviously, a lot of guys had checked out by then when they didn't make the playoff. But they were playing as good as anybody and probably should have beat Alabama at Alabama. But Lenore Sellers is a guy that I'm very high on. He was our FWA Freshman Offensive Player of the Year. I got to meet him and talk to him. This kid is an intellectual. He's really smart. And from what Mike Shula tells me, they're going to be able to do so much more with him this season. I don't know what his supporting cast looks like, but this guy, and I hate to throw this out here, it's quite a comparison, but he's got a little Cam Newton look about him when you look at how big and fast and strong and how well he can throw the ball when he's dialed in. So I'm going with Lenore Sellers, number 2.
I also took Lenore Sellers with my number 2 pick.
Okay.
Instrumental in turning South Carolina around. He took South Carolina from a team that's like, all right, we're playing South Carolina this week to, oh, my God, I wish we didn't have to play South Carolina this week. And if you're a Georgia fan, maybe that you were saying that to yourself last year. Like, I'm actually really glad we don't have to play South Carolina this year. So I don't think it necessarily matters the supporting cast that you have around Lenore Sellers. He's a playmaker, and he's going to continue to help the improvement of South Carolina. So I took him with my number 2. My number 3 is a little controversial.
Okay.
A lot of this is projections and predictions and just fulfilling the prophecy. I put Arch Manning. He's not number 1 or number 2, but he's got to be top 3. And until he just has an absolute crash out this season, I mean, most people are putting Arch Manning as their number 1 without ever seeing him play a full game. But I think Arch Manning's the real deal, so we're going to put him at 3 because he can't be 1, he can't be 2, but he can't be anything outside of the top 3.
Well, you know what? I actually agree with you. I'm a little surprised you went there. I haven't gone with Nussmeier yet. I'll tell you why in a minute.
That's
But I like Arch Manning's mobility. I agree with you about the prophecy. Look, there's a reason Georgia wanted this guy, Kaylee. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why it was a big deal when he picked Texas over Georgia. We all went, oh boy, we're going to have to live with this one down the road. Well, here it is. And I'll tell you this in full transparency. I said this before the SEC title game. If I were Georgia, I would have been more worried about seeing Arch Manning than Quinn Ewers because of his mobility and, the poise that this kid has, the confidence he has. I mean, he's grown into every bit of the athletic quarterback that his granddad was. I mean, he runs better than Peyton or Eli. And he was a skinny kid. I mean, remember when he was being recruited and Jeff went down there, Jeff Santel went down to New Orleans and did all that tremendous in-person reporting, and all signs were that he was going to Georgia until Texas came in with a lot more money. But, and you looked at him, you said, he just doesn't look and now you look at him and say, oh my gosh, look at how he's grown into this frame. Look at how athletic he is. Look at how tall he is. Look at that arm. Mm-hmm. And he actually picked up a couple first downs on Georgia in that game in Austin before he got clobbered and lost the ball. You saw enough there to say, oh, yeah, this guy's coming along. So I'm with you. I'm going to go with Arch 3, and I'm going to go with Nussmeier 4. And the reason I have him 4 is because of I'm a little worried that he's not going to be durable. He's had some injuries, and I think people are going to send the dogs after him, no pun intended. Yes, he's an experienced quarterback. Yes, he's an NFL quarterback, but he doesn't, quote unquote, scare me with his legs like those 3 guys that I have ahead of him, Lagway, Sellers, and Arch Manning. So that's why I have Nussmeier 4. And that's not a slap in the face. I mean, I think if Georgia could get him, I think they probably would, right? So, yeah. I mean, this is a really talented guy that's going to play in the NFL that has those NFL abilities, maybe kind of like a Carson Beck without the drama. How about that?
Yeah, so this is where we switch because I took Lagway at 4 as well.
Okay.
Based on what we saw from him in that second half of the Florida season, like this is somebody that people need to be scared of in the future because this is a player that can turn around a program. I still think that he has a lot to prove, but what I imagine DJ Lagway is going to be this year is what we all thought Nico was going to be to Tennessee last year. What you saw from him at the end of his freshman year, that's all anybody wanted to talk about was what kind of quarterback Nico was going to be. I don't think that he lived up to that. I think that DJ Lagway is going to be what we thought Nico was supposed to be in his second season. So I put DJ Lagway at my 4. At my 5, I put Gunnar Stockton. He was pushed into the spotlight after Carson Beck's injury. I think he handled it as well as he could have. But he's still got a lot to prove. And at this time, anything could happen with this quarterback room. I do think that Gunnar Stockton will end up being the starter. But he's got some things that he needs to work on before I can put him in a top 4. Because, I think if you're looking at the 4 guys ahead of them, like you would take them over Gunnar.
I'd take Nico over him too. I take
Really?
with the mobility and the big arm. I don't know that Nico is in an offense or that he's had the receivers. I watched the game against Ohio State and I thought he took a beating, and that was good and bad, right? There was a part of me that said, "Man, this kid keeps getting up." I don't know how he keeps getting up, but he got the literal knocked out of him. But now he's a third-year guy. He's an NFL quarterback, Kaylee. This guy's going to be playing, and he's going to be on somebody's fantasy football team if he stays healthy. He is built a little slight. He's a little thin. But, man, that arm is electric. His mobility is impressive. I think that, at times he looked a little awkward. I thought maybe his decision-making was a little off. But he was asked to do a lot. He was asked to do a playmaker. He was asked to be more of a playmaker than I think a lot of teams. So him going into his third year under Josh Heupel, this is a potential breakout player. Georgia opens their SEC season on the road in Neyland Stadium. So we'll find out there, unless something crazy happens in the portal. Gunnar Stockton will have a chance to go head-to-head with Nico, and I think a lot of fans will, be able to pass judgment on which quarterback they'd rather have by the end of that football game.
Yeah, I actually did take Nico at my 6. The injury part does scare me with him because we did see him get banged up last year, and now he's going to have to put a lot more on his shoulders now that Dylan Sampson has gone off to the NFL. There's going to be a lot more pressure on the shoulders of Nico, and how is he going to be able to handle something like that? I think that's something that we'll be able to find out when Georgia plays Tennessee early on. So I got Nico at my 6.
Well, my 6 is a guy that beat Alabama, and he's coming back for more. And he may not have the supporting cast, but Diego Pavia, you want to talk about a playmaker. This guy was a playmaker. This guy put Vanderbilt football on his shoulders and beat Alabama, something that Carson Beck couldn't do. Vanderbilt really rallied around this guy and his ability to run the ball, his ability to play make. If you ask yourself, if you take the emblems off the helmets, he's kind of a little bit more athletic version of Gunnar. Gunnar's kind of a small, tough guy like him, but this guy has a big arm and he's got a lot of experience too. And again, he beat Alabama. That was not an illusion. That was probably one of the 3 biggest storylines in the SEC last year was Vanderbilt beating Alabama, the one place where Nick Saban said the home stadium didn't matter. And Diego Pavia made him eat his words and was able to get another year of eligibility. So that's why I have Diego at 6. And then I get into Gunnar Stockton. And even though I hear all these people tell me about how good the Ole Miss quarterback looked when he came in for Jackson Dart, and, I hear so much about Jackson Arnold and, him transferring in, I like how much Gunnar prepares. I like his moxie. And I don't think there's any substitute for the experience he had leading Georgia to a come-from-behind win against Texas. So, on the surface, if you said, wow, Mike and Kaylee ranked the quarterbacks and, Gunnar was 6 on one person's list and 7 on the other, you might say, well, that's a slap in the face. But when you stop and look at the players that we have ranked above him, they're pretty much all proven commodities outside of Arch Manning. Mm-hmm. They've all gotten it done and won football games and carried teams. We're not talking about game managers here. We're talking about playmakers. So I think having Gunnar at 7 and then Austin Simmons from Ole Miss, I'm gonna put 8 because I know that was a small sample size, but I think Lane Kiffin is really good working with quarterbacks.
Yeah, to close it out here, I took Diego Pavia with my 7. Big players make big plays. That's what he does. Just wish he was on a better team. But I do think that he's coming with a vengeance after he finally got an extra year. And then I put Taylor Green from Arkansas at 7. I think another year under Bobby Petrino will do him well. But, I mean, when you look at his numbers from last year, over 3,100 yards in the air, 15 touchdowns, 602 yards on the ground, and another 8 touchdowns. I mean, that's just a guy that I think 1 year could benefit him, and I think that Arkansas can take a step forward with him. All right, so in just a moment, we are going to do an all-around sports cap. But first, guys, this GA is a lot different. It's not going to be televised. So if there was a time ever to tune in to the Dog Nation pregame and postgame, this is the time to do it. If you subscribe to our Dog Nation YouTube channel, you'll get the reminder of when they are going to start. So the pregame will start at 11 o'clock on Saturday. It'll also take place at the UGA bookstore. You can come visit, come watch, be a part of pregame. And then, of course, the Brandon Adams postgame show will also be at the UGA bookstore directly after the game. Brandon is calling it the most important postgame show he's ever done because this one's not going to be televised. So if you want to hear a full breakdown of what happened as well as be able to see some of the things that occurred, make sure to tune in to the postgame show. Or, again, you can come visit us at the bookstore at 11 o'clock for pregame and right after the spring game for the postgame show. So let's get into some other sports. We'll go through these pretty quick. We've been pretty high on UGA baseball. They were a top 3 team. They traveled to Austin, Texas, which is not an easy place to play, get swept. Their next SEC series will not another easy one. Number 1, Arkansas, they will host, but they do drop to number 7. You know, in the grand scheme of things, Wes Johnson told us the SEC schedule is hard, and especially to do it away. So, you know, it's tough getting swept, but next weekend is a really good opportunity to show that UGA can compete with the best of them.
Yeah, you know, and it's going to be at Foley Field, which is a great environment. And, you know, the Dogs are going to be motivated after a tough series at Texas. Didn't really play their best baseball until Sunday and then just got beat straight up. You know, sometimes that happens. I mean, Texas is ranked number 2. So this is kind of a hold my beer moment for Georgia baseball. You know, we talk about the football schedule. We talk about the men's basketball team schedule. Now you got the baseball team going from playing number 2 on the road to number 1 at home. And the SEC, of course, dominating the rankings again. You know, Georgia, I think, number 6, and most of those polls might be number 7 in one of them. But look, the rankings don't really matter. It's a long season. Wes is trying to develop some guys, bring some arms along. I think Georgia can grow from these experiences. I do think this is an important series. You'd like to take 2 out of 3 from Arkansas. You know, these sorts of games and series are going to be looked at the end of the year by the selection committee. And, you know, Georgia certainly wants to be able to host a regional and super regional. So this is going to be a big series in terms of solidifying their resume at the end of the year.
Let's talk basketball for a minute. Silas Demery Jr. headed to UConn. R.J. Godfrey going back to Clemson, but UGA does pick up the star Cal transfer, Jeremiah Wilkinson. With the departure of Demery and Godfrey, what's next for Georgia basketball?
Well, I don't really know what their salary cap is, right? We know that some programs have $10 million to spend at Arkansas, you hear that Chris Beard at Ole Miss wants to go from $7 to $9 million. I don't really know where Georgia's at, but I don't think it's $10 million or $9 million. So I don't know what Mike White has to work with. I would imagine some of that money got freed up with Asa Newell headed to the NBA. I think Silas Demery Jr., from what I've heard, was probably asking more than he was worth. I thought he was a very good team leader, and I know he played well at times, but I thought his shooting percentages, weren't the best, and I thought that there were a lot of turnovers for him at point guard. I think Mike White really set him up for success. It's too bad kids don't have an appreciation for how they're being used. I don't know what he's been promised at UConn, but it's hard for me to imagine him being a better conference or being in a better situation as he would have been as a third-year starter and team captain. So, but at the end of the day, it's a business. It's a money. I don't think anybody can begrudge him. Godfrey, I thought, came in, provided some punch, some experience, kind of a blue-collar guy. But, when you saw George out there on the court against Gonzaga, he just kind of disappeared. Mm-hmm. A little bit too small, maybe not as dominant a rebounder, maybe not as equipped offensively as you'd like with his back to the rim. So Clemson makes an offer, and Georgia's got to decide, is the juice worth the squeeze? And obviously they didn't want to match or offer more, and so he's headed back to Clemson. I mean, this is this is the part we don't really like about college sports right now, because it used to be, not to say it's not fair to the student athlete, Kaylee, but it used to be you'd get connected to these guys and you'd watch them grow before your eyes. And now, it's pretty much free agency. So I know the Florida teams that Mike White coached and the Georgia team that I saw him build last year, long, very good against the two. Defense travels, very sound, typically don't beat themselves. Again, there was a little more turnovers than you would have liked last year, but I think that's a concession that Mike made for Silas Demery Jr. to let him run the point. I don't think he was a true point. I'll be interested to see what Mike does with that position this year and who he gets and who plays there. But I'm optimistic. I think Georgia wants to be back in the NCAA tournament. Again, I don't know the payroll. I don't know the budget. I would dare say that, hopefully Georgia would be somewhere in the middle of the pack. It's hard to win when you don't have as much money to pay players as the Dukes or the Gonzagas or the Alabamas or the Auburns, for that matter. But I thought Mike White did a great job. And, Florida takes the floor tonight. And, I think everybody's just going, Georgia beat this team. The last time Florida lost was to Georgia.
Yep.
Georgia beat these guys. Mike White beat this team. And this team's playing for a national title tonight against Houston. So, pretty interesting stuff there. We'll keep an eye on that and ear to the ground. Obviously, this basketball portal window, I think there's a little bit left in it. And, of course, then the football portal window, which I believe goes the 16th through the 25th. So after G-Day, we got a couple weeks free agency there. We'll see if there's any surprises there. You've heard Kirby saying, hey, I don't know which one of my guys might jump in that. And some of these other programs are offering a lot of money that, in a year from now, they're going to have to cut back, but they're kind of front loading. Is Georgia pursuing somebody? Does Kirby got a trick up his sleeve? Is there a player out there that maybe Georgia has fashions on, an impact player, that might catch us by surprise? You just remember, who was the quarterback at USC? Caleb Williams.
Oh yeah.
We remember when Stetson went on TV and he was all angry and saying he didn't know if he could trust his coaches. We didn't know what Stetson knew, that Georgia was trying to get Caleb Williams for 2022. Yeah. We didn't know that. Just imagine. And now, as it turned out, Stetson went undefeated and won a national title in 2022. But there was a chance if Georgia could have gotten Caleb Williams. I mean, I don't know if they could have won any more games, but it would have looked different. And so you never really know what's going on behind the scenes. Stetson knew. That's why he was upset. And I don't know, he probably had a right to be upset, Kaylee. I mean, he just won a national title, and Caleb Williams is, in the house. It's like, but Kirby's not going to apologize. And the thing is, we've interviewed Gunnar Stockton, and Gunner's like, oh yeah, no, this is Georgia. You're supposed to try to get the best here. And that's part of what I love about Gunnar Stockton. He doesn't care. He's like, look, I'm here to compete. I expect to compete against the best at Georgia. And that is the right attitude. And that is the attitude of a winner, Kaylee.
All right, to close us out here, Mike, 2 very quick picks from you. I need to know who's going to win tonight's national championship and who's going to win the Masters. Boy. Do you have a Masters pick?
Well, you know what? I really don't. I have not looked. In full transparency, I got to beg out of the Masters pick. I'd just be throwing a name out there, and I have not studied that. Golf, there's only so much capacity here, right?
That's fine.
But I will stick with my bracket pick when my bracket had Houston beating Florida in the national championship game. A little humble brag, I picked the 2 final teams there. So I'm gonna stick with that pick, even though I don't really have a lot of conviction. Florida looks real good. I mean, I thought Auburn had them, and those guards are so good. And it's interesting. Everybody says, "Oh, what happened to Cinderella?" Do you realize that 4 of Florida's 5 starters are transfers? Mm-hmm. Cinderella's out there. They're just playing for major programs now. Had they not been able to transfer, there would be Cinderellas. I want to say Belmont's got a few guys that are out there on different teams, and you'd still have Cinderella if we didn't have NIL. But these Cinderella players are transferring out. Now, Auburn had 4 out of 5 starters that were transfers as well, and I'm pretty sure Houston is a little transfer heavy too. I think Duke and Michigan State were the 2 kind of organically built teams, as I recall. I'm BYU, maybe there's a couple others, but for the most part, this is what it is. It's who can sign the best team from year to year right now, and we'll see how that evolves. If maybe we can get back to some rules that a one-time transfer rule, perhaps, or if you do it a second time, you got to sit out a year. I don't know. I don't know which way the pendulum's going to swing. That's why the House versus NCAA decision today is just kind of the first step in a process as we start to look at the new world of college athletics.
All right, real quick before we go, for the sake of my bracket, I need the Gators to win tonight. So,
did you pick Florida to win it?
Of course, I picked Florida to win it.
And you're going to get on me about putting DJ Lagway #1, and you picked Florida in basketball. How
hey,
about that?
they won the SEC tournament. They were hot. They looked like the team that was going to win, and I believe an SEC team was going to do it either way. So if it wasn't going to be Auburn, it was going to be Florida. And then my Masters winner, I pick Rory McIlroy every single year until he wins one. I'm going to be putting his name on that list, mostly just so I can manifest that win for him because it would be good for the sport of golf. So that's how we're going to close out today. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us here on the Beat on this Monday. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Mike Griffith. We'll see you right back here next Monday to do a G-Day recap at 7 o'clock.